Hello. This is where they started. It began with the chameleon. They talked together about the chameleon's ability to change color. She thought that the chameleon's adaptation to its environment was the perfect metaphor for the idea of imitation as camouflage. He expressed discomfort at this parallel and said he was unsure about comparing their mimetic function to the defensive gestures of reptiles. Meanwhile, she marveled aloud at the chameleon's adaptiveness and agility. She learned that the chameleon reflexively adapts to its environment through an amalgam of synapse and pigment, a chromatic response to fight, flight, or freeze. Though unconscious, the chameleon's adaptations are highly effective. They can even change their bodies and make themselves appear as thin and as flat as a large leaf. She marveled at the unconscious precision that they possessed and wondered what it would be like to adapt and change with such ease. He noted that our own human attempts at imitation are far more imperfect. Messy variations from the original corrupt our attempts to blend. He saw these gaps in the mimetic function as markers of perception, signaling assumptions and oversights of form and content. While she looked to biological evidence of the mimetic function, he looked at mimicry as an exchange of sorts, a kinetic manifestation of psychic investment. Anyway, it began with the chameleon. They started here. And then they made this. Their conversations about the chameleon morphed into discussions of the chameleon effect, a phrase coined by research sociologists to refer to the unconscious mimicry of another's postures, mannerisms, and facial expressions. They spent a lot of time discussing the ways that they internalized various mannerisms and gestures into their own performances of everyday life. Researchers into the chameleon effect generally agree that those engaged, that dispositionally empathetic individuals exhibit the chameleon effect to a greater extent than others. Put another way, mimicry and empathy circulate in two directions. They thought about this in terms of the labor that the dancers had been executing. They chuckled at the fact that on some level all the dancers they knew were engaging in acts of imitation and mimicry as a part of their daily practice. They came back to where they started, talking about the chameleon effect, and the two-way street between mimicry and empathy. Whereas sociologists identify mimicry as a product of empathy, dancers mimic by tracking momentum, bodily alignment, and weight, acknowledging another body's movement in space and time through careful attention to minute details. She thought that a dancer tracking momentum was parallel to empathy. She said it was about living your life in italics, and he liked the way the phrase sounded, but though he had no idea what it meant. What they could agree on was this. The chameleon and the chameleon effect gesture towards each other, but diverge in their intentions. Whereas the chameleon mimics its environment to defend itself, hiding against the bark of a fallen tree, those engaged in the chameleon effect take on the movement around them to mark their attention to that which they are not. They thought about this as they sat in their chairs, contemplating the space between them. At one moment, this space seemed like a finite gap, easily bridged by the reaching out of hands, and at times it seemed like a chasm.